Like just stuck. Do you guys know what that kind of stuck feels like? Feeling of being stuck. I was feeling that when I was 6 years old between my mom and dad. It was like, I learned at 6 years old that it's not good to pick a side. You know, you just keep your mouth shut and deal with it. And sometimes my mom would hit me, and you know, she would take it out on me, and then I'd hate her, and then later on she'd come to where I'd cried and I couldn't fall asleep, and it's like 3 a.m. on a school night. I'm 6 years old, and then she would be like, I'm sorry. Did any of you guys ever get hit by your mom and then like you really hate her, or your dad or your guardian, grandma, and just really hate them, and then all of a sudden they say they're sorry, and then you feel bad for hating them? What was that? Why? You know, that's the kind of stuff I grew up going through. You know, and I see you guys nodding, and it's like, yeah. And you know, that's why I do what I'm doing, because I need to remember that it didn't just happen to me. You know, I mean, you look at the text, you look at the muscles, you look at all that stuff that I went through just so I wouldn't have to do what I'm doing now. You know, sometimes when I speak and my eyes get watery, I've done this like with social workers. I go talk to social workers like, hey, don't give up on the kids you work with. You know what I mean? They might seem crazy, but there's hope. Look at me. And I go talk to them. And sometimes when I cry, I know they're looking at me like, oh man, this dude's still messed up. You know what I mean? But no, as a matter of fact, I'm not messed up anymore. Because when your eyes leak, your head doesn't swell. You know? And it's okay to show emotion. It's okay. It is. But when I was going through that, it wasn't. But now, in fact, when you see me get emotional, that's like, right on. He's healthy. He has healthy emotions. You know, you can't just always be either real happy or really pissed. There's actually 21 emotions that every human has, you know? And so I said you know twice. That's a bad mistake when you're speaking in public. So remember that when you guys change and go speak places, don't say you know too many times. But what ended up happening is, aside from that going on at the house, then at school they're picking on me. I don't know how many of you got picked on at school, but I used to get picked on at school every day. In school they used to call me MRFF. You guys know what that stands for? Mental retarded freckle face. Every day on the way to school, at school, MRFF, and they'd hit me and push me, and I remember, regardless of what was going on at home, and I wasn't sleeping, regardless of what was going on at school, my dad signed me up for a little league team. We sucked. There was 12 games and we lost every one of them by like 20-0, man. Like now when they play sports, don't they usually stop it like at 5? Like so you guys don't get blown out that bad? Isn't that what they do? Or else they give the other team a chance, or they try to make it fair. Back then they did, and it was like 20-0, and yeah, and MRFF when I'd be up at bat. It was like cruel. But even with all that happening, you see the picture of me, because like you, every one of you that is in juvenile hall, every one of you that's in the situation you're in, what makes you keep going? What does it? You know, if you get a chance, the word is called resiliency. It's called perseverance. And every one of you has it. See, the way I figured it out later in my life is, if I could hang in juvenile hall and keep a strong mind, why is it that every time I get out, I can't have that same strong mind? Suddenly, well, I want to quit smoking and I haven't smoked in this long, but man, you know, I need a smoke. And then suddenly I was playing spades, working out, doing really good with everybody, writing and reading, and I was good. And as soon as I'd get out, you know what I mean? I wasn't able to just have a normal day unless I had a beer, because it sucked. And to me, it's like, I started thinking, how can I be in juvenile hall and be okay and be funny and be cool, and be motivated. But then when I get out, I can't have any fun unless I got a head change. But like I said, this is something I ask myself every time, and I didn't get it, changed until I was in my late 20s. Because every time I'd be in there, I would trip out. I do push-ups and, learn new words, expand my vocabulary, and just everything. And, the majority of the time, we didn't have anything in juvenile hall. We didn't. So it was just, that was normal. I could be okay. I could be funny, have fun, make it through the day. If you've been here long enough, time just starts to go fast. You're not even bored anymore. And then when you get out, it's funny. It's like right here, you don't have a cell phone. You don't have the internet. You can't watch what you want. You're not on your bed. You can't shower when you want. You can't make any food you want. You have no weights. But then as soon as I would get out, there'd be a phone, a TV, weights, everything, and I was bored. I was like, wait a minute. If I had all that in juvenile hall, I'd never be bored. But as soon as I get out of juvenile hall, I have all this stuff and I'm bored. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like these weird head games. And then I'd be like, nah, that's just somebody was brainwashing me in the hall. Yeah, they just don't want me to have fun. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'd be like, yeah, they're stupid, man. It was, no. And then next thing you know, I'd be with handcuffs on my way back, and I'd be like thinking to myself, all right, what the heck happened? And then what happens as soon as I'd walk into the hall, hey, Longoria, hey, and I was like, all right, it's cool. And it was just over and over. Well, going back to what happened, they used to call me MRFF at school, and my parents were dysfunctional. You guys know, have you guys heard the term dysfunctional? If you guys have had counselors or therapists or people, they use the term dysfunctional. That means that the way you see things and the way you do things is different than the majority of people who don't get locked up. And so what I learned to do was function in my dysfunction. Do you know every one of you who gets through the day in juvenile hall and it's not even boring anymore and time's starting to fly? Do you know what that is? You have become functional in your dysfunction. That's what that means. That's why if you ever had parents or neighbors and they were always fighting and you'd be like, man, why don't you just leave her? Why don't she just leave? Because that's where they've learned to function in all that craziness and getting away from that, I remember when I used to think that normal, just a normal life, was a change. And, there's a lot of people out there that change is normal. And people like us, change isn't normal, huh? It's just like, I'd rather just stay with this than really go out there. And I say that because that's what I did. And I'll continue with the story. I don't want to get sidetracked too much. I'll wait for you guys to ask questions. And wow, all right, time's going by fast. Okay, so where was I? At MRFF, right? All right, so I'm MRFF, stuff's going on at home, Little League, at school. They didn't just mess with me a little bit, they messed with me all day. So I used to think it was safe to be in the school. I used to like being in the classroom and sharpening pencils and helping the teacher put stuff on the desk. And, I didn't really like recess. Recess wasn't fun for me. So in third grade, I'm in the cafeteria and I'm walking and all the first graders are in there, all the second graders are in there, all the third graders are in there. And I'm walking in there and I have my tray, and as I'm walking with my tray, somebody trips me and I eat it hard, boom, and I fall. And when I fall, I fall on the foods all over me, and I get up and I'm like, have you guys ever just been walking and all of a sudden you're walking and then you look up and people are watching you and you're all embarrassed? Now imagine how I felt in third grade eating it like that in front of the whole school. And and they're yelling, MRFF, MRFF, loud. And I'm in this cafeteria, and I remember I stood up, and I'm just like, I'm crying. And trauma, from what I understand, trauma is when you feel more than one emotion at once. And I felt afraid, I felt nervous, I felt anxious, I felt mad. I felt all these feelings. That was a very traumatizing experience. And I remember I stood up, and I have like mocos coming down. That's like boogers in Spanish. And everybody's like, yeah, we know what that means, dude. And so I had boogers coming down. I was crying, food everywhere. And understand, and I want you to really hear this, at 8 years old, I seen things different. And I want you guys to remember that, because I don't know what you've been through in your own life, but if it's stuff that happened to you when you were young, maybe you didn't see it the way you thought you seen it. But for me, at 8 years old, I remember looking around and like nobody came to help me. And then on top of that, even the teachers looked like they were laughing. And I remember standing there, and I remember for the first time ever, that feeling I always had, like, whatever, man, it'll be okay, and just keep going forward. It wasn't working no more. And I remember at 8 years old, I remember I was crying and boogers, and I was looking around. Nobody came to me. And an 8-year-old mind, remember that, an 8-year-old coping mechanism, I even seen the teachers laughing. And I remember, like, it just happened. You guys all know what I'm talking about. You don't make it happen, but then it's just like, F that. Never again. Never. Never again is anybody going to mess with me. Ever. And it just happened. And from that moment on, if I didn't like the way I felt, just no more. And that's what I did. They started saying I had an anger problem, I had poor impulse control. But no, what it was is that little boy that you seen in that picture, nobody was going to hurt him anymore. Nobody was going to lie to him. Nobody was going to punk him. I was done. At 8 years old, I was just done. And I remember and that was the first time I learned how to change my emotions. Whenever I didn't like what I felt, I would get pissed. And then over time, I don't know how far you guys are into it. I don't even know how it happens anymore. I'm cool one minute, and the next minute I'm pissed. It can be at a girl, it can be at my kids, it can be at another person. Growing up, it just started happening more and more. Till by the time I was 12 years old, I didn't even know when it happened. I'd be cool, and all of a sudden, like, shut up, man, boom. And like, hey, what the heck's wrong with you? And I would just then they'd take me to the office, and I couldn't act like I was scared. Any feeling I didn't like, I would just act madder and angrier and angrier. And there's a place for angry people, right? I mean, at school, they try, and then they kick you out of school. Then probation tries, and then, how many times do you go to court before they finally really lock you up? You know what I mean? You're there a couple of nights, and we're going to give you another chance. All right. But at the end, when they finally did put me in juvenile hall for over a month, it was like I had gotten so many chances. I just kept getting mad. So after that, it changed. I started hitting kids. They'd go by MRFF. I'd run them down and just hit them. And little by little, they started leaving me alone. 3rd grade, it's like near the end of the, kind of like May, June, April. It was like April. And it was like the ending of 3rd grade, and almost, because when we came back, it was August, September, like November. So it was like April, and I'm in 3rd grade, and I'm coming home from school. Remember, all this other stuff has happened already. So I'm coming home from school, And me and my sister used to meet at the end of the street, and she would come and I would come, and we would walk. And we would walk, I don't know, it was like 2-3 blocks to the house. And as I was getting home, I remember I was getting home and I started looking, and I could see my mom standing on the sidewalk and my dad on the lawn. And then as I got closer, there was a truck with a lot of our stuff in it. And I remember I was getting closer, and my dad looks at me and he's like, "Mijo, come here, your mom's leaving." And I remember I just like, this is what I would come home from school to in 3rd grade. And I remember I broke, like trying to run to my dad, and my mom reached over and grabbed me. I was 8 years old, and she threw me in the truck. And I remember at that moment, everything that I told you about my dad leaving me out in cars and all that kind of stuff, you guys, I had forgot about that. I really had. That moment when my mom threw me in the truck, I remember I looked at my dad and I felt so bad for him. And from that moment on, I never thought about all the stuff he had done. And I remember I looked over at my mom, and I don't know how many of you have ever done this or when it happened in your life, but I remember I looked over at my mom and I was like, I effing hate you, because when my mom left my dad, it was, I don't know how many of you have ever seen that happen or were a part of it. But again, I'm 8 years old, and with an 8-year-old coping mechanism, I really believed that if my mom would have hung in there, if my mom would have just hung one more week, my dad would have changed. And when you're 8 years old, you believe that kind of stuff. You believe people will change.